Today is Friday, July 30th, 2021, and you are listening to the 83rd broadcast of TBR Radio Presents the TBR History Hour. My name is Dr. Edward DeVries. I'm a contributing editor at TBR Magazine, the Barnes Review Magazine, and for the next hour, it will be my joy to be your host, your guide here on the TBR History Hour. The TBR Radio Network was established in 1989 when TBR's founder, Willis Carto, acquired the Sun Radio Network. Willis Carto had established the Liberty Lobby, and the Liberty Lobby had acquired the Sun Radio Network back in December of 1989. And Willis's vision was to use the Sun Radio Network as the means of launching a national conservative talk radio vehicle. Of course, the talk radio airwaves were still dominated back in the 1980s by liberals. You think of NPR, for example, National Public Radio. And what we now see as conservative talk radio was actually the brainchild, if you will. It was the vision of TBR founder Willis Carto. Last week here on TBR Radio, I had shared with you a speech, a presentation, a program that I had given to a gathering of patriots in Silver Spring, Maryland, just a couple of weeks ago, earlier in this month on, I believe it was July 12. And Sid Secular over at the Citizens Former had helped us to put that meeting together, and we're grateful to Sid for having done so. Sid, by the way, had been a great and dear friend of Willis Carto for many years. As that broadcast went out this past week and people all over the world have listened to it, someone had emailed me and had told me that Willis Carto had spoken to many of the same things that I was speaking to. And he had done so all the way back, we believe, in 2004. They said that they were at a speech that Willis had given at the Atrium Hotel. And so we were able to get a copy of that recording. And I believe it's something that you, our listeners, will enjoy listening to. I believe that it will be edifying to you to be able to hear what Willis said way back in 2004. Let me just say that Willis Carto, our founder here at TBR, he was a hero to many people around the United States, and he was a hero to everyone here at TBR. He founded TBR, the Barnes Review Magazine, I believe some 26 years ago now. He was the founder of the American Free Press. Before that, he had founded a newspaper which was the predecessor of the American Free Press called The Searchlight. Willis Carto was the founder of the Liberty Lobby. He was the founder of the Institute for Historical Review. Some have referred to Willis Carto as the William Randolph Hearst of the 20th century American patriot movement. Willis was a brilliant man, and it is my honor and my privilege to follow in his footsteps and, at least in some small way, to carry on the great work that he had started. And so, without any further ado, we're going to break for a commercial from one of Willis's publications, our namesake TBR, the Barnes Review, about a 45-second commercial, and then about 45 minutes of Willis Carto speaking on how the mainstream media is being manipulated.
Your web browser and type in www.barnesreview.org and discover the Barnes Review magazine. In the Barnes Review, you will read vignettes of man, from the prehistoric to the very recent, from forgotten races and civilizations to first-person accounts of World War II and the late Cold War. There is no more interesting magazine published today, nor a more significant and important subject than real history. So visit www.barnesreview.org and subscribe to the Barnes Review. You can subscribe to receive the Barnes Review magazine in its print form, or in convenient electronic delivery. Our host has been a subscriber to both formats for years. So visit www.barnesreview.org and subscribe to the Barnes Review.
In a brief little introduction, I went to war as a young lad of 18 in 1944. I don't know what I accomplished in that, and I don't know what America accomplished in that war. But I've been involved in my neck, up to my neck, in a very important war, and a very significant war, a war that's very meaningful for every American. just shortly after, about 10 years after I got out of the war, against our internal enemies who have openly said that they intend to reduce America to a province in an international, quote, new world order, to quote President George Bush the first, and to reduce our culture to garbage, our traditions and ideals to forgotten legends, and our precious liberty to a bad joke. At the age of 77, Father Time warns me that I have only 20 or 30 years left before I must consider retirement. So if America lasts that long, I intend to be here to continue to aid in increasing the total of truth-seeking in the print media and in books and on radio and periodicals. Basically, I guess you could say I am a champion printing salesman. I have made more printers very happy and paid mortgages on their homes and on their trucks and on their automobiles because I have literally throughout my life printed tons and tons of literature, patriotic, populist, nationalist literature. And so at least I can say that I have made lots of profit for many printers. In the course of doing that during the last 50 years, since 1954, I have concurrently originated a number of organizations and publications during that time, all to try and promote important information to those working to save American sovereignty and our Constitution. I can name Right, Western Destiny, Washington Observer, Liberty Letter, Liberty Lowdown, the Spotlight, the Journal of Historical Review, the IHR Newsletter, the Barnes Review, and today I'm associated with a wonderful, experienced staff in Washington, D.C., who published the American Free Press. And we have copies of the American Free Press at that table there. You can subscribe at $10 off during the time of the convention, and also in the outer lobby, Norm Heffernan. I hope that those of you who are not subscribed will take this opportunity to do so. I've also been able to publish over 200 patriotic, populist, and thought-provoking books, and would have brought out at least that many more had it not been for sabotage. And although little I've done has attained the large circulation and influence I have liked, I believe that the cumulatively they have had some impact on the course of events, providing a select group of Americans who call themselves patriots since before Mr. Ashcroft ever thought of that term, with valuable and constructive reading material, which may have somehow slowed down the annihilation of our culture. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you that the media is the enemy. The media is the enemy. I think most of us know that. I'm going to try to explain why I believe that to be so. I want to prove in the following hour the media control is power. Plutocrats control the media. The media is indeed a monopoly, and their democracy is a sham and a fraud. And that's why the media is the enemy. That's basic step number one for anybody who is trying to understand what is happening to us. The concentration of control of the media by the plutocrats is escalating at a rate unlike we've seen in decades. More and more, as the weeks and months go by, an elite few, a handful of wealthy families and interests are gaining a stranglehold on the major media. As a young man coming back from World War II, I knew there was something wrong. I could see the course of world events and domestic affairs here at home was skewed. I could see that the priorities of our national leaders was out of touch with the interests of the American people. And I sat about trying to find out essentially who was to blame for this sorry state of affairs. And you know what I discovered early on? It was this. The fact that on virtually every issue you can name, whether it be foreign policy, trade, taxes, immigration, race relations, finance, and economics, The media monopoly was supporting positions on those issues that ran counter, that ran against the interests and the wishes of the American people and the national interest as well. Through their immense clout, the big daily newspapers and news magazines, and of course radio and television, were attempting to impose their agenda, really the agenda of the owners of the media, on the American political process. And what's frightening is that nothing has changed. It's only gotten worse. And the bought and paid for politicians and bureaucrats in Washington are not doing a thing to stop the growing concentration of media ownership and power. In fact, they're doing everything possible to try to expand it. And in the American Free Press, we had a number of articles about this congressional effort. And it's ongoing. Many bought and paid for congressmen, which includes about 434 of them. And the interests behind them are doing everything possible to establish a monopoly of media. Everyone from Thomas Jefferson on up that had any bit of honesty in his being knows that without individually owned media, it'd be nice if there were no chains of newspapers at all, and just individual local newspapers. Most of them are pretty well worthless anyway, as anybody I think can say who does subscribe to the American Free Press. And can I please have a show of hands of subscribers to the American Free Press here? Okay, good. Well, you know, and stop me if I'm wrong, that every week you're reading important news, Sarah, that isn't in the media. Well, thank God there are folks like our host, Payman Madahida, who aren't afraid to challenge the powers that be and the risk defamation and dismemberment by the elite interests that control the media monopoly. And thank God, too, there are millions of people like you who recognize there is something wrong with the media and turn to alternatives and publications, like American Free Press and many other fine publications that are represented right here at this meeting today. Now let's look at some basics. Back in '98, they said that the Spotlight was paranoid when we featured an exclusive report analyzing the growing concentration over the major media. Critics said it was just another one of these wacky conspiracy theories. You know about them. Just like you see in the movies. Well, it was a theory backed up by facts, and it's gotten a lot worse. In totalitarian countries, the Spotlight then noted the government controls the media. But in the United States and around the world, many would say that the controllers of the privately owned media control the governments. And they do so in order to promote their own special interests. The Constitution said the government shall, the First Amendment makes it clear that the government cannot impose, should not impose, is not supposed to impose domination over the media. We're supposed to have freedom of speech in this country. But it says nothing about private interests controlling the media. And it shouldn't have. But this is what's happened. Private interests that really control the government also control the media. Professor Ben Bagdikian, a prominent media critic and author of the book, The Media Monopoly, has pointed out the media lords of the global village, and incidentally we call it the global plantation, have their own political agenda. All resist economic changes that do not support their own financial interests. Today, they exert a homogenizing effect over ideas, culture, and commerce that affects populations larger than any in history. Neither Caesar, Hitler, Franklin Roosevelt, or any pope has commanded so much power as to shape the information on which so many people depend to make decisions about everything from whom to vote for what to eat. Monopolistic power dominates many other industries, and most of them enjoy special treatment by the government. But media giants have two enormous advantages. They control the public image and national leaders, who as a result fear and favor the media magnates' political agendas, and they control the information and entertainment that help establish the social, political, and cultural attitudes of increasingly larger populations. Unquote. According to Robert W. McChesney, of the Institute of Communications Research at the University of Illinois, quote, the global media system is fundamentally non-competitive in any meaningful economic sense of the term. Many of the largest media firms have some of the same major stockholders, own pieces of one another, or have interlocking boards of directors. To continue, when Variety compiled its list of the 50 largest global media firms in 1997, it observed that merger mania and cross-ownership had, quote, resulted in a complex web of interrelationships that will make you dizzy. Christopher Dixon, media analyst for Payne Webber, commented at the time, quote, what you are seeing is the creation of a global oligopoly. That's a monopoly controlled by a number of different monopolies. It happened to the oil and automotive industries early in the century. Now it's happening to the entertainment industry, and it's happening to banks. Just a month ago, there was an announcement that Morgan Guaranty had taken over Bank One. I think 59 or 57 billion dollars. Now it used to be, I suppose it's not too long ago. You all remember this. There was legislation against banks. Banks couldn't operate outside of the state. They couldn't even operate outside of their own jurisdiction. Well, they got that fixed. The lobbyists fixed that up. And today there is virtually no restriction on banks. Banks operate anywhere and everywhere. And of course, it's very profitable. You don't just walk in a bank, a big bank, and every time you go in, there's a new teller there, right? Usually a minimum wage person. I usually from the third world. The banks pay their employees minimum that they can, because all day long, the directors of the banks scheme how to make more money out of money. They shuffle paper and they make money. Banking is the most non-productive business in the world. They produce nothing except loans, which they loan out of nothing. As you know the story of the Federal Reserve. If you don't, be sure and buy the supplement we have over at this table here by Sheldon Emery, Billions for the Bankers, Debts for the People. You don't know all the story of the money. I won't go into that. But the banking industry, the bankers are literally taking over America. They're operating in every state. There's no restraint on them anymore, as far as I know. And it's inevitable that pretty soon there's going to be one big monopolistic bank everywhere. And you know what's going to happen then? That's communism. That's communism. Monopoly capitalism is communism. Monopoly capitalism is communism. In 1989, there were 11 major media giants emerging as the most powerful names in the global media monopoly. As the Spotlight predicted, the numbers of the major controlling entities would decrease even as their various media holdings increased. Then there are 9 major corporations dominating the global media. Although 2 of the 9 are actually controlled by one family. Let me spend a few moments taking a brief look at these media giants. Number 1, Time Warner, the biggest by far. Time Warner is the largest media corporation in terms of annual revenues. Once the fiefdom of American media leader Henry Luce, and at least remember his wife, Claire Booth Luce, who came up with a memorable phrase that she called all the global propaganda global money. Remember that? Henry Luce was a journalistic genius and avaricious. He made an awful lot of money. He was the founder of the Time Life publishing empire. This global media conglomerate today is dominated by Edgar Bronfman, not even an American, president of the World Jewish Congress and heir to the Seagram's liquor fortune of his late father, ex-bootlegger Sam Bronfman, a top-level figure in the international crime syndicate dominated by the late Meyer Lansky, who, during his lifetime, was the boss, quote, the boss of bosses of organized crime. The merger in the 1980s of the former Luce Press with Warner Communications set the stage for expansive growth of this massive worldwide empire, which now has more than 200 subsidiaries. The Warner Brothers Studios, a famed Hollywood film company, merged with Seven Arts Production Company based in Canada in 1967. The founder of Seven Arts was Louis Chesler, a longtime frontman for Crime Boss Lansky. The new operation formed by the media was dubbed Warner Communications. Now, not surprisingly, a major stockholder in Warner was the infamous flight capital money laundering empire known as Investors Overseas Service, which was headed by Bernard Cornfield. You probably remember him. As flamboyant playboy, Cornfield was actually no more than a frontman for Swiss banker Tibor Rosenbaum, a high-level arms procurement officer for Israel's intelligence service, the Mossad. Rosenbaum's bank, the Credit International, based in Geneva, also functioned as the chief drug and gambling money laundry for the Lansky crime syndicate. Considering all of this, it is probably inevitable that the Bronfmans, moving from their organized crime antecedents to the world of legitimacy, would emerge as key players in the Time Warner empire. Here's a representative sample of the more eminent holdings in the Time Warner octopus. Home video, Time Life Video, HBO Home Video, Warner Home Video, cable franchises reaching almost 12 million subscribers, Turner Broadcasting, including all of the CNN holdings, including TBS Superstation, CNN International, CNN Radio, and Headline News, Magazine, Time, People, Sports Illustrated for Kids, Life, Fortune, Money, Vibe, InStyle, Parenting, Baby Talk, Martha Stewart Living, a woman, Stewart Sunset, Health, Hippocratic, the Greek physician, the Hippocratic Oath, Asia Week, President, Who, Entertainment Weekly, Cooking Light, Southern Living, DC Comics, American Lawyer, and Dance You. DNCYU, never heard of it. And book publishing, Oxmoor House, Sunset Book, Little Brown and Company, Time Life Books, Warner Brothers, Book of the Month Club. What I just said, that's Time Warner media giant. The second largest group is Seagram's. Although Time Warner is very much a Bronfman family-dominated operation, through the Time Warner shares held by Seagram. Seagram is one of the major media conglomerates on its own part. Edgar Bronfman's son, Edgar Bronfman Jr., operates Seagram as his personal plaything. Remember that next time you buy a bottle of booze. He controls Universal Music Group, the largest recorded music firm in the world, along with Polygram, a major music company, as well as Universal Studios and TV channels throughout Europe and Latin America. Number 3, News Corporation. This is the empire of Rupert Murdoch, whose flagship newspaper, the neoconservative, the neocon, that's a very important phrase to remember, New York Post, and his neocon Weekly Standard magazine, edited by Bilderberg figure William Crystal. By the way, who here has heard of the Bilderberg? Okay, I must proudly tell you that you would never have heard of the Bilderbergers if it wasn't for the Spotlight. The Spotlight's the only newspaper in the United States of America. They consistently, every year, track the secret conspiratorial organization, which is composed of the major, the dominant figures in the world of finance, economics, journalism, and politics. Murdoch's sleazy Fox Television reaches 40% of the American viewing public. Murdoch also controls substantial media properties in Asia and Latin America. Number 4, Disney. Tightly run by Michael Eisner, now under attack, curiously. This global giant has assumed control of ABC television and radio, Hyperion Books, Chilton Publications, a variety of trade publications, Fairchild Publications, Women's Word Daily, the Arts and Entertainment Network, Lifetime Network, and ESPN, along with a host of local newspapers all over the country. Number 5, General Electric. This corp, believe it or not, I always thought General Electric made vacuum cleaners and light bulbs. They have now consumed control of ABC television and radio. No, I'm sorry. They control NBC television and radio, CNBC, the History Channel, and Court TV, among other holdings. Number 6, AT&T Liberty Media. Formerly the telephone company, this media giant has holdings in Time Warner, News Corporation, CNBC, Sprint, PCS Group, along with substantial holding in South America and Asia in cable, satellite, and broadcast television. Number 7, Sony, controlled by a Japanese billionaire who has been accused of being a front for the Rockefeller family, which quietly bought up huge interest in Japanese corporations following World War II when they were selling for a song. So don't let anybody tell you that wars aren't fought for nothing. Sony produces films in Europe and Asia and television programming on 5 continents, not to mention the lucrative music empire that reaches around the world. The inside joke is the word Sony, S-O-N-Y, stands for Standard Oil of New York. 8, Viacom, headed by Sumner Redstone, another very powerful figure, was a devout supporter of Israel, a little known to the American people. This firm owns Paramount Pictures, MTV, and the Blockbuster video chain. 9th, Bertelsmann. This is a German company established in 1835. It's the largest TV and radio firm in Europe, and it owns US-based Random House Publishing, which critics have called the CIA's favorite publishing company. Random House subsidiaries include such well-known book publishers as Alfred A. Knopf, Ballantine Books, Beginner Books, Crown Publishers, Fawcett Books, Fodor's Travel Publications, Modern Library, Orion, Pantheon Book, Times Book, and Vantage Books. This company has publishing enterprises in Germany, Britain, and Argentina, in addition to the U.S. And that's just a brief overview. I haven't even mentioned the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Los Angeles Times, or the media empires that these corporations control. The very names of these newspapers and the influence they carry speak for themselves. The hotel here is kind enough to pass out copies of the Los Angeles Times to all of the guests this morning. And if you're strong enough to carry it down at the breakfast table, as I do, you notice that 99% of it is nothing but advertising. And of course that's what it's all about. Advertising is the name of the game. And the news is very little. I got absolutely nothing out of the Los Angeles Times this morning. The comments of the aforementioned Professor Ben Badikian regarding the growing concentration of media ownership summarize the whole situation very well. Quote, when 50 men and women, chiefs of their corporations, control more than half the information and ideas of these 249 million Americans, it's time for Americans to examine the institutions from which they receive their daily pictures of the world. The United States has an impressive array of mass communications. There are 1,700 daily newspapers, 11,000 different magazines, 9,000 radio, and 1,000 television stations. There are 2,500 book publishers and 7 movie studios. If each of these were operated by a different owner, there would be 25,000 individual media voices in the country. And incidentally, I can tell you the American Free Press is an independent media, and certainly not, and it's listed as one of these media publishers. Why one of the very few that's independent. If each of these were operated by a different owner, there would be 25,000 individual media voices in the country. But far from opening their system to journalists, authors, dramatists, musicians, and citizen groups, the big corporations are working to close them off to outsiders and ideas. Theirs is a strategy of total control. What's going on?
I apologize to you all. The hotel forgot to provide the microphone for the speakers of the hotel. They just provided us. That's why we couldn't hear Willis very well. So please accept our apologies. Willis, this is the hotel microphone. Please speak into it so they can hear you.
Don't tell me I have to start over.
You don't have to start all over. I don't have to yell either.
Is this better?
Oh, yeah.
Could you hear anything I said before? Well, there is a strategy of total control. Now, so far, American Free Press has not received a mind-boggling offer that we can't refuse from any of these media giants. So if we do, you'll notice it right away, I'm sure. They buy every possible means of delivery, print, broadcast, films, etc. They strive to use their own rather than the independently produced material. Then they convert it to as many forms of media as they control. Even the world's scholarly, scientific, and technical journals are now controlled by the big media barons. Belatedly, nations of the world are recognizing that they and their corporations must be restrained from polluting the earth and its atmosphere with chemicals. The basis for all liberty, however, freedom of information, is also in danger of being polluted. Not by chemicals, but by a new mutation of that familiar scourge of the free spirit, centrally controlled information, unquote. That really sums it up very well. The concerns about the control of the media by private special interests are also expressed quite well by a liberal writer, Dr. Michael Parenti, in his book, Democracy for the Few. Quote, while the news in totalitarian nations is controlled, we Americans supposedly have access to a wide range of competing sources. Let me point this thing out. Everyone knows that the news in a totalitarian system, in a system that doesn't have what we call democracy, is controlled. And that way the people realize that. I'll never forget talking to some Hungarians one time, years ago, and they didn't believe a thing in their newspaper because they knew it was controlled. So they came over to America and read American newspapers and they believed it. In reality, the control exerted over the media in the United States, while more subtle and less severe than in some other countries, leave us with a press that is far from free by any definition of the word. The news media are important to any study of American politics. They select most of the information and misinformation and help define us, help us define socio-political reality. Almost all the political life we experience is through the media. How we view issues, indeed, what we even define as an issue. That's an important point. An issue has to be defined. And you don't think the big media is going to define the real issue, which of course is the loss of American sovereignty and the growth of the New World Order, do you? That doesn't exist. They select most of the information and information help us define social political reality. How we view issues, what we even define an issue or the event, what we see and hear, and what we do not see and hear are greatly determined by those who control the mass media. Dr. Parenti forthrightly confronts what I call the controlled media. He writes, who controls the mass media? 5 New York banks, Chase Manhattan, Morgan Guaranty Trust, First National Bank, Bankers Trust, and the Bank of New York own controlling shares in the 3 national television and radio networks, NBC, CBS, ABC, and are powerful shareholders of the New York Times, Columbia Pictures, and 20th Century Fox. You see how they're all interlocked. Okay? These banks have representatives on the board of the 3 networks and control all network fiduciary and debt financing functions. The networks themselves exercise a controlling interest over publishing houses, film companies, and recording companies. They own television stations located in key urban areas, reaching a lion's share of the national audience. Newspapers show the same pattern of ownership, with most of the big circulation dailies being owned by chains like Hearst, Garnett, and Copley, unquote. We have a lot more on Copley. We're in their territory. Is this a controlled media? A controlled media? or simply another conspiracy theory? Will you be the judge?
What sentence?
Now you're going to have to pardon me for a personal digression here, but it touches directly on the topic of the controlled media. I just mentioned the Copley Press, based right here in California, publishing the super profitable San Diego monopoly, the Union Tribune, which used to be my daily toilet paper. Sadly, the people of San Diego County are forced to be polluted daily by the Union Tribune. I suppose that most of them are ignorant of their plight. San Diego, you know, is very, very heavily populated by retired Navy and Marine and military personnel. They feel very patriotic. They just don't realize what the facts of the Copley Press. I've been featured in the San Diego Tribune, not, as you might guess, in the most friendly ways. But then I've never been accustomed to friendly media coverage. In any case, when the San Diego Tribune published a vicious attack on Liberty Lobby on October the 25th, in the year 2000, few of its readers knew that as long ago as 1977, the paper and its publisher, the Copley Press, were exposed as hardly more than a front for the CIA and the notorious Anti-Defamation League. What's more, it turns out that the Copley Press and Union Tribune also function as a conduit for an intelligence arm of the FBI. That a CIA front should level an attack on Liberty Lobby at this time is no coincidence. The carefully timed smear was clearly designed to influence and scuttle Liberty Lobby's appeal of an unjust judicial ruling that resulted from a lawsuit orchestrated against Liberty Lobby by a known CIA operative. At the very moment the Union Tribune published the smear, Liberty Lobby's appeal of the judgment was being considered by the California State Court of Appeals. Although the ruling was not expected for perhaps another 6 weeks. Just 5 days after the article appeared, the court suddenly issued a ruling and rejected Liberty Lobby's appeal. The legal case against Liberty Lobby was brought under direction of a shadowy CIA covert operative named Andrew E. Allen of San Francisco. He's the son of an extremely wealthy family. He's one of many such socialites who dabble in hobby in intrigue. And he works very closely with, for years and years, with the CIA and with the Simon Wiesenthal Foundation. Living off the fruits of his family's multiple trusts and a lucrative real estate fortune, Allen admits to having devoted a substantial portion of his time to active engagements in what are clearly covert operations in the CIA's sphere of influence. Allen is the sponsor of one Mark Weber, who has spearheaded the operation to destroy Liberty Lobby and the Institute for Historical Review, and now the American Free Press. And Allen's sponsors at the CIA would issue orders to their underlings at San Diego Union Tribune to attack Liberty Lobby on cue. There's no real surprise considering the truth about the newspaper and its history. Ironically, the journalist who first publicly revealed the long secret Copley Press Union Tribune linked to the CIA is Joe Trento, a liberal who is a longtime enemy of Liberty Lobby and who, in fact, had a long-standing close relationship with the top CIA official, James Angleton. As a matter of fact, we sued Joe for libel one time and won. However, in August 1977, Trento co-authored an expose of the Copley CIA connection, entitled "The Spies Who Came In from the Newsroom," which was quite revealing. Among other things, Trento reported that the Copley Press and Union Tribune newspaper, which previously, of course, was two separate newspapers, published by Copley, both, quote, provided credentials, information, and placement of stories for the CIA and the FBI, exchanged information with the CIA for scoops and planted CIA and FBI stories and editorials, harbored CIA operatives on the payroll of the Copley News Service, and fed stories to the news service clients at the request of the CIA and the FBI. Unquote. Trento's investigation also determined the Copley News Service, which actually had been a financial failure, was set up by James S. Copley at the suggestion of then President Dwight Eisenhower for the purpose of supplementing CIA activity. A series of meetings and phone calls between Eisenhower and Copley, outlined in documents produced and examined by Trento, they revealed that Copley volunteered his newly formed news service as the eyes and ears for our intelligence services, and that Eisenhower told the publisher that his favors were appreciated and would be reciprocated when possible. Although Copley News Service lost money every year, Green Gregston, the former editor of the San Diego Union, admitted to Trento that CNS was never run to make money. It was an ego thing for the CIA, for Jim Copley, and the CIA wanted it. According to Trento, no less than 23 Copley News Service employees had worked for the CIA simultaneously. Although there were some 194 American newsmen who had CIA connections during that same period, according to Trento. CNS was the only news service that engaged in full cooperation with the CIA for 30 years. The CIA connections of the Copley Empire were such that, according to Trento, again I quote, CNS reporters often acted as if they were doing CIA public relations. When the CIA decided to throw over Latin government, the CNS would begin writing unfavorable information about it. Editorials would appear in the page of the Tribune and Union in San Diego, warning of the dire consequences of communists in Latin America. Then articles on freedom fighters and anti-communist opposition would appear on the CNS wires. When the coup came, Copley editorial was. Unquote. Trento also revealed that Copley Press's relations with the FBI are as intriguing as its CIA connections. Trento's investigation revealed that many times Copley reporters were turned into virtual informants for the FBI, so much so that the Copley Press effectively, in Trento's words, ran a system of intelligence gathering for the FBI. According to Trento, Copley reporters were sent to cover anti-war demonstrations and other public meetings of discussions of dissidents. Afterward, when the reporters turned in stories and photographs, the materials were often turned directly over to the FBI and never even published in the Copley newspapers. Trento quoted Union Tribune photographer Thane McIntosh, who said that forwarding the photographs to the FBI was something, quote, that all the photographers suspected. Some were disturbed about it, and some were not. But you couldn't help participating. You had the assignment, so you did it, unquote. One photographer was asked to supply pictures to the LA Police Department, according to Trento, but that photographer refused and quit. In addition, Copley employees were ordered to draft memos on events that they covered, which memos were turned over by Copley management to the FBI. Trento also revealed the FBI used Copley to release raw and often unverified data about individuals whom it did not approve. In other words, the Copley Press would effectively publish unproven smears of individuals who were targeted for special treatment by the intelligence community. Also, Trento learned the FBI placed editorials in the Copley Press against dissident groups of which the FBI did not approve. I mean, dissident groups weren't sponsored by the FBI. When one Copley writer, Vi Murphy, attempted to force full disclosure by Copley regarding the names of journalists at Copley who were collaborating with the CIA, she was told that she could, quote, never utter another public station or another three-letter word spelled CIA as long as she was an employee of the Union. So much for the so-called independent media in America. When you have secretive, powerful agencies funded by our tax dollars, such as the CIA and the FBI, interfering with and manipulating the so-called free press, there is no free press at all. The fact is, the CIA has a major influence on the American media, and this further adds to my contention that the plutocrats do control the media monopoly in this country. In case you haven't figured it out, the CIA functions as a virtual enforcement arm, the hit squad, if you will, of the powerful international financial interests that dominate economic life in the United States and really around the world. In regard to the aforementioned Washington Post, certainly the most powerful newspaper in America, although it's rivaled by the New York Times, It's also a mouthpiece of the CIA. I'm sure that doesn't surprise you at this point. In regard, some years ago, a young Jewish girl, Deborah Davis, wrote a thoroughly devastating book, Catherine the Great, which exposed the covert ties between Katharine Graham, the owner of the Washington Post, and the CIA, much to the dismay of many in the Washington establishment. However, Ms. Graham managed to use her clout, along with that of the CIA, to actually get the book shredded by a publisher prior to the book receiving rights distribution. That's right, the book's publisher actually withdrew the copies they had out, called them from their warehouse, and shredded them, even after it had gone to all the expense of publishing it and printing it. The result was, in the long run, Ms. Davis actually won a court judgment against her publisher for contract violation. She actually found an honest judge to do that. And that in itself was quite a feat. Fortunately, however, the book was re-released in 1991 by a small New York publisher, and we promoted it in the spotlight at that time. Another thing worth noting, although the Graham family does have substantial controlling interest in the Washington Post Company, if you ever bother to read the ownership for the report that is required to be published in every newspaper with a second-class permit every year, you'll find out something very interesting. The truth is that there are many other powerful elements in the world of finance that have substantial interest in the Washington Post Company, ranging from the Rockefeller-controlled bank like Chase Manhattan to, again, here we go, and Morgan Guaranty, to a bevy of other banks with British and Rothschild family connections. No wonder the Post never reports on the yearly meetings of the powerful Bilderberg organization, even though Katharine Graham always attended. Only the Spotlight and now the American Free Press has had the guts to do that. I'm sure that you've all read the articles by Jim Tucker, the veteran reporter for the Spotlight and now the American Free Press, who every year has managed to find out where these malefactors meet, and he's never been able to actually infiltrate the meeting while they're going on. But of course, he gets a lot of information, and we get a lot of information from the staff, the hotel staff. In many respects, Katharine Graham, now deceased, was really only a front for a wide-ranging host of other big money interests who had a vested stake in controlling the most powerful newspaper in the capital of the most powerful nation in the world. The evidence shows that the CIA also had a hand in placing favorable reviews of books that often were actually produced by the CIA itself in newspapers. For example, two writers, Morton Mintz and his co-author, Jerry Cohen, in the 1976 book, Power Incorporated, describe on page 283 how the April 1976 report issued by the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence Activities revealed that a book, quote, a book written for an English-speaking foreign audience by one CIA operative was reviewed favorably by another CIA agent in the New York Times. The review, Mintz and Cohen wrote, this was not a member of the Times staff. In addition, Mintz and Cohen note, quote, one of the pre-67 books in which the CIA had a hand was the Penkovsky Papers, which purportedly was based on reports of a Soviet spy who was executed. Unknown to the publisher, Doubleday, CIA agents had written it. This became a commercial success and was serialized in many newspapers, including, of course, the Washington Post. Similarly, the public had no way of knowing that the United States Information Agency had sponsored two books written in the 1960s by Jay Mallon, a Time correspondent for that magazine, The Truth About the Dominican Republic and Terror in Vietnam, unquote. In regard to CIA manipulation of the media, David Wise, writing in the American Police State, pointed out that the CIA had not only attempted to interfere with or prevent the publication of books critical of the CIA, but the CIA had also set up a task force to draw up plans to suppress one of Wise's previous books, The Invisible Government, which of course was about the CIA. In fact, Wise obtained CIA documents that indicated that the CIA task force recommended that the CIA use its agents and contacts in the news media and publishing circles to attempt to bring about hostile reviews of the book. The purpose, according to CIA document, was to lessen the book's impact and cast doubt on the validity of its claim. Now, what we're talking about, the CIA, let me remind you that the CIA is heavily involved in the illegal drug traffic. CIA and CIA operatives make an awful lot of money out of illegal drugs. That's what we mean when we're talking about the CIA. Now, a former chief of the Washington Bureau of the New York Herald Tribune and a fellow of the Woodrow Wilson Institute Center for Scholars in Washington, D.C., and contributor to New York Times Magazine, New Republic, Esquire, and other national magazines, Wise can hardly be called a conspiracy theorist. And now here's an excellent example of how the major media can twist the truth for its own ends in relation to one of the most talked about events of our time. When on November 22, 1996, the CIA-influenced Washington Post drafted someone to write what turned out to be a favorable review of the Warren Commission report on the assassination of President Kennedy, accompanied by negative reviews of several books critical of this report, the Post shows Eugene Rothschild, then dean of the Yale Law School. Here's what the prestigious Dean Rothschild wrote of the Warren report, which, as anyone should know, is a tissue of lies from start to finish. Quote, "The report is a masterly and convincing state paper. It has a high polish of legal writing at its best, carefully composed, terse, restrained, and meticulous. In a detached and judicious tone, it deals with every feature of the case, discussing and evaluating the basis for the conclusions the Commission reached and the rejection of the various contrary theories which had been advanced," unquote. But neither the Washington Post revealed when it published the review, nor did Rothschild mention it, was that it was Rothschild himself who was the first to suggest to President Johnson that such a commission as the Warren Commission be established. At the very least, there was a fraud upon the readers of the Washington Post. The readers had a right to know Rothschild's intimate and first-hand role. And what's interesting to note is that Rothschild's role in the affair was not publicly known until 1993, 30 years after the JFK assassination, when transcriptions were released of President Lyndon Johnson's recorded White House telephone conversation in the days following the Kennedy assassination. For the previous 30 years, the idea for the Warren Commission was attributed to others, but Rothschild's role was never mentioned. So for 30 years, the truth was a closely guarded secret. Today, a major public relations voice for the interests of a foreign nation, Israel, is the Anti-Defamation League, ADL, which has been a foremost critic of the independent media in America. And certainly is going to do everything possible, always had to protect the interests of the Internal Revenue Service and the bureaucrats that work for it. It's worth pointing out that one of the 20th century's most revered muckrakers, famed journalist George Seldes, devoted much time and energy and books documenting that private interests do control or otherwise influence the media. Perhaps the most comprehensive regular critique of the media in recent years has been compiled by Project Censored, based at Sonoma State University. Project Censored gave an award to Liberty Law, to the Spotlight, in 1990 for publishing 2 of the top 10 most censored stories of that year. One of them dealt with the fact that the Bush administration had given Saddam Hussein a green light for the invasion of Kuwait at the time. That was by our late correspondent, Andrew St. George. And that story was deemed by Project Center to be the #1 most censored story of the year. Now, what? All right, fine. Now that's funny because he promised me I could have 3 hours. Well, okay. Anyway, one more thing. As you know, there's a lot of media critics which have criticized Mel Gibson's movie, The Passion of the Christ, as being too gory, too violent. Isn't that funny? Coming from the media itself, and they're criticizing something for being too violent. Well, anyway, folks, I think it's time for us to stand up and do something about it. We have to know the truth, because the truth is going to set us free. We can't know the truth if we're going to continue to be victimized by the controlled media. I hope what I've said today has proven to you that the media is controlled and who controls it. And I hope that when you read newspapers and watch television and so on, from now on you realize what's going on, what is really going on. We need to have government by the people and for the people. In short, my friend, it is time to break up the media monopoly before it's too late. Let's all get mad as hell and tell these media barons we're not going to take it anymore.
If you're like me, and I'll bet you are, you like to be on the cutting edge of honest news and accurate information. You like to hear about the latest financial trends and to know what's happening around the world and right here in the United States. The things that can directly impact you, your life, and the life of your family. And if you're like me, you do not rely on the mainstream media to obtain this information because, frankly, you know that you just can't trust them. Fortunately, there is an alternative news outlet with a long-established track record for honesty and integrity, and that is the American Free Press. AFP is the preeminent alternative independent news source for honest, hard-working, truth-loving Americans. AFP is the antithesis of the controlled, lamestream media. AFP is employee-owned and has been so since its founding. Because of that, AFP never has and never will allow advertisers or special interests or big money to dictate what appears in the pages of the American Free Press newspaper. 26 times a year, the American Free Press newspaper can be delivered to your door, packed with the kind of uncensored news that I know you're going to appreciate. AFP covers the stories and tells the truth that the lamestream media is frankly scared to touch. And AFP offers real, on-the-scene reporting and commentary, the likes of which you will never see in the Washington Post, the New York Times, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, or just about any other lamestream news source that you can think of. That's right, there's only one national populist news weekly staffed by an unsurpassed team of veteran investigative journalists who will dare to rip the veil off of many of the major news stories that are being censored and suppressed by the big money controlled media monopoly. And that's the American Free Press. AFP publishes exciting, in-depth, uncensored news and information that's grassroots and patriotic, information that Americans need to know in order to combat the growing police state. AFP stands firmly against the New World Order and against those who are working to establish a global plantation under the rule of a powerful few. In short, AFP is your voice. If you have any doubt why they want to silence AFP, you must be relying on the lamestream media for your news, and folks, that's a big mistake. If you're ever dissatisfied with your subscription to the American Free Press, their guarantee is that you just drop them an email and they will gladly refund the unused portion of your subscription. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.americanfreepress.net. Once again, www.americanfreepress.net. And find out about the American Free Press. Do it today.
Extra, extra, read all about it.
The last 45 minutes or so before the commercial was TBR Radio founder Willis Carto speaking back in 2004 at the Atrium Hotel on the subject of the manipulation of the media and how the mainstream media is manipulated and muzzled. And the things that Willis said back in 2004, almost 20 years ago, are just as appropriate today, if not more so, than they were when he originally spoke them. Anyways, we are out of time for today's show, but we will be back again next week, same time, same place, with another great show for you. So be sure to tune in again next week. Until then, go to our website, www.barnesreview.org.